The quantum communicator in Yexketh's observation pod crackled with interference patterns that shouldn't exist. His primary neural cluster was processing 17 different emergency signals simultaneously, while his secondary brains handled the absolute impossibility of what he had just witnessed. The human female stood in the clearing below, casually inspecting an arrow that had somehow punched through armor plating designed to withstand antimatter explosions. Control, this is Forward Observer Yexketh, requesting immediate priority transmission to High Command. His voice carried the subtle harmonics that indicated extreme psychological distress among his species. We have a situation that requires specialized classification protocols. The response came through encrypted channels, layered with enough security measures to protect state secrets. Observer Yexketh, your last 3 reports have been flagged as either equipment malfunction or psychological breakdown. Are you absolutely certain about what you're claiming? Yexketh's optical organs focused on the scene below, where the human had begun what appeared to be a head count of the alien youngsters clustered around her feet. 23 cubs from 7 different species, all orphaned by the Great Convergence War, all supposedly under the protection of the Galactic Preservation Authority. All of them now looking at their human caretaker, with expressions that somehow managed to convey both absolute trust and barely contained excitement. High Command, I am transmitting raw sensor data now. Please note the timestamp correlation between the Grimlock Beast's approach vector and the human's response pattern. He paused, his mandibles clicking in what his species considered nervous laughter. Also note that our tactical computers are refusing to process the ballistic calculations, claiming the results violate fundamental physics. The Grimlock Beast's corpse lay 30 meters away, its massive form still radiating heat from metabolic processes that wouldn't stop for another 6 hours. The creature measured 18 meters from snout to tail, possessed natural armor that had evolved to deflect energy weapons, and typically required coordinated strikes from full military battalions to bring down. Its skull was roughly the size of a small transport vehicle. Through that skull, precisely centered between the primary and secondary brain chambers, was a hole exactly the diameter of a standard Earth hunting arrow. Observer, identify the human for our records. Yexketh consulted his datapad, though he had memorized the information days ago. Designation, Valerie Knox. Age, 34 standard years. Occupation, elementary education specialist with certification in wilderness survival techniques. Assigned to the Kepler 7 refugee camp as cultural liaison and childcare coordinator. Equipment manifest, standard civilian survival kit, emergency medical supplies, and... Yexketh paused, checking his readings again. 1 primitive projectile weapon of Earth origin. Classification, recreational hunting bow. Tensile strength, insufficient for penetrating Grimlock armor. And yet she killed a fully mature Grimlock Beast with a single shot, while simultaneously organizing 23 alien youngsters into what our tactical analysts describe as a defensive formation that would earn honors at the military academy. The human in question was currently kneeling beside a small Andraxian cub, whose bioluminescent patches had dimmed to barely visible levels. Her voice carried across the clearing with the kind of authority that made hardened soldiers snap to attention, despite speaking in tones so gentle they could lull nervous younglings to sleep. Hey there, Glowbug. That was pretty scary, wasn't it? She carefully examined the cub's tiny claws for injury, her movements precise enough to perform microsurgery. But look what happened when we all worked together. The bad thing went away and nobody got hurt. The little Andraxian's patches flickered with faint blue acknowledgement. Around the clearing, 22 other cubs from species that should have been natural enemies sat in perfect harmony, their attention focused on their human protector with devotion that transcended biological imperatives. High Command, there's something else you need to understand about the tactical situation. Yexketh's voice dropped to the whispered tones reserved for reports that might end careers. The human didn't just kill the Grimlock, she educated it. Static filled the communication channel for exactly 14 seconds. Explain. The beast approached from the western tree line at approximately 1500 hours. Standard hunting pattern for a mature Grimlock, slow advance, intimidation display, then rapid assault on the most vulnerable targets. Keth pulled up the recorded footage, his optical organs tracking movement patterns that his military training said were impossible. The cubs detected the threat first. Their response was coordinated. The recording showed 23 alien youngsters moving with fluid precision into positions that maximized defensive advantages while minimizing exposure to attack vectors. They hadn't panicked. They hadn't scattered. They had executed a tactical withdrawal that would have earned approval from the Strategic Combat Institute. The human's initial reaction was to ensure all cubs were positioned behind adequate cover. Then she retrieved her primitive weapon and... Keth's voice trailed off as he watched the recording again. High Command. She talked to it. She talked to the Grimlock Beast? For approximately 3 minutes and 47 seconds. In what appeared to be a firm but reasonable tone, she explained that the cubs were under her protection and that the beast should consider alternative hunting grounds. The recording captured every word of a conversation that shouldn't have been possible. Grimlock beasts were evolutionary killing machines with brain structures designed solely for hunting, consuming, and basic survival functions. They didn't negotiate. They didn't retreat. They certainly didn't engage in philosophical discussions about territorial boundaries and dietary alternatives. But Valerie Knox had tried anyway. I understand you're hungry, big guy. Her voice carried clearly through the sensor array. But these little ones have been through enough. How about we find you something more appropriate, something that doesn't involve terrifying children? The beast had responded with a roar that registered on seismic equipment 3 kilometers away. Its massive jaws had opened to display teeth designed for rendering armor plating into digestible fragments. Its claws had extended to full combat length, each one capable of slicing through battleship hull material. Valerie Knox had sighed with what sounded remarkably like maternal disappointment. Okay, I tried the reasonable approach. She had raised her primitive bow with movements so smooth they seemed choreographed. Kids, remember what we practiced about staying low and covering your eyes. 23 alien youngsters had immediately dropped behind cover and assumed protective positions that would have made veteran soldiers proud. High Command, what happened next defies every tactical manual in our database. Keth's recording equipment had captured the shot from 17 different angles. The human drew her bowstring and held it steady for exactly 2.3 seconds. During this time, the Grimlock Beast completed its charge, covering a distance of 30 meters while accelerating to combat velocity. The arrow had left the string with a soft twang that barely registered on audio pickups. It had traveled in a perfect arc that accounted for wind resistance, gravitational effects, and the beast's forward momentum. It had struck the precise point where 3 different armor plates met, creating a gap exactly the width of an arrow shaft. More impossibly, it had punched through bone that was harder than most industrial alloys, navigated between 2 separate brain chambers without damaging either, and somehow avoided every major blood vessel that would have caused the creature to bleed out slowly and painfully. The Grimlock Beast had stopped mid-charge, blinked once with what almost looked like surprise, and toppled over dead from instantaneous brain death. The shot was perfect, High Command. Not lucky, not approximate. Perfect. Keth's voice carried the weight of someone reporting a phenomenon that would require rewriting basic military doctrine. Our ballistic experts calculate the probability of such accuracy at approximately 14 billion to 1 against. And the human's response to achieving this impossible shot? Keth consulted his recordings again, though the memory was burned into his neural patterns with the clarity that accompanied traumatic experiences. She walked over to the beast, retrieved her arrow, examined it for damage, then returned to the cubs and announced that snack time would continue as scheduled. The current scene below showed exactly that. Valerie Knox sat cross-legged in the center of a rough circle, distributing nutrition bars and hydration packets with the same calm efficiency she had demonstrated while killing an apex predator. The cubs chattered excitedly in 7 different languages, their traumatic experience already transforming into an adventure story they would cherish for the rest of their lives. Observer, we're dispatching a full xenobiology team to your location. Do not interfere with the human or the cubs. Do not attempt communication. Simply monitor and report. Understood, High Command. Yexketh settled into his observation position, optical organs fixed on the impossible scene below. There's one more thing you should know. What? This is the third Grimlock Beast she's killed this week. The previous two were eliminated with throwing knives and what she described as a particularly sturdy hiking stick. The tactical reports are similarly impossible. The communication channel went silent except for the background hum of quantum entanglement. Somewhere in the depths of High Command, very important beings were having very quiet conversations about what to do when a single human civilian demonstrated combat capabilities that exceeded their best theoretical projections. Below in the clearing, Valerie Knox was helping a young Kepler cub open a nutrition packet, while simultaneously teaching a Zephyrian hatchling about proper wing-folding techniques. Her movements were gentle, patient, utterly at odds with what she had accomplished minutes earlier. "How's everyone feeling?" she asked, her voice carrying the same warmth she had used for bedtime stories. "Any questions about what just happened?" A tiny Helix youngster raised one tentacle shyly. "Miss Valerie, how did you know where to shoot the bad thing?" Valerie Knox smiled with the kind of expression that made hardened observers feel like everything might actually be okay with the universe. "Well, honey, sometimes when you really need to protect someone special, you find out you're capable of more than you thought." She ruffled the cub's sensory appendages with obvious affection. "Plus, I've been practicing. Your safety is worth getting good at difficult things." Yexketh transmitted his final observation of the day, with hands that trembled slightly from prolonged stress. "High Command, I believe we need to reconsider our threat assessment protocols for human civilians, especially those assigned to childcare duties." The universe, as it turned out, had been significantly underestimating the lengths to which human females would go to protect youngsters under their care. This was about to become a very expensive lesson for anything stupid enough to threaten human-protected children. 2 hours later, Yexketh found himself documenting another impossibility. The human had constructed what appeared to be an impromptu educational display, using the deceased Grimlock Beast as a teaching aid. 23 alien cubs sat in rapt attention as Valerie Knox conducted what she cheerfully called practical anatomy lessons. "Now, see here where the arrow went in?" She pointed to the precisely placed hole with the casual air of someone discussing weekend gardening projects. "This is called the medulla oblongata junction in Earth biology. It's where the brain controls automatic functions like breathing and heart rate." A young spiral-wing cub raised her delicate appendage. "Miss Valerie, how did you know about alien anatomy?" "Well, Whirlpool, I've been reading." Valerie Knox produced a datapad from her survival pack, its screen displaying what appeared to be comprehensive xenobiological research. When you're responsible for keeping someone safe, you learn everything you possibly can about potential threats. Yexketh's optical sensors zoomed in on the datapad's contents. His neural processors nearly overloaded trying to comprehend what he was seeing. The device contained detailed anatomical diagrams for over 400 different predatory species, complete with vulnerability analyses, behavioral patterns, and tactical response protocols. "High Command," he transmitted on emergency channels. "The human has been conducting independent research on galactic fauna. Her database contains information that should be classified at the highest military levels." How did she obtain such data? According to the file timestamps, she compiled it herself through what she terms casual observation and deductive reasoning. She's been taking notes on every dangerous creature within a 100 light-year radius of her assigned sector. The implications made Yexketh's sensory organs twitch with nervous energy. A human elementary education specialist had single-handedly created a threat assessment database that rivaled military intelligence resources. She had done this while simultaneously caring for 23 traumatized alien youngsters and maintaining educational activities that kept them psychologically stable. "Miss Valerie," asked a tiny resonance cub, his harmonic voice barely audible, "are there more bad things that might want to hurt us?" Valerie Knox's expression shifted to something that made veteran observers instinctively check their escape routes. Her smile remained warm and reassuring, but her eyes held the kind of calculating intelligence that generally belonged to strategic warfare specialists. "Honey, there are always things in the universe that might cause trouble," she said, her voice maintaining its gentle cadence while somehow conveying absolute certainty. But you know what? I've made a very detailed list of every single one of them. And I've figured out exactly how to handle each situation. She gestured toward the fallen Grimlock Beast with obvious satisfaction. Some creatures respond to reasonable discussion. Some need firmer boundaries. And some... She patted the primitive bow at her side. Well, some need to learn about consequences. The cubs absorbed this information with the kind of complete trust that only children could display. They had no idea that their human caretaker had just announced her intention to personally catalog and develop countermeasures for every predatory threat in known space. Yexketh, however, understood the implications perfectly. High Command, I believe we're witnessing the emergence of a phenomenon that doesn't exist in our theoretical frameworks. Explain. A human female has decided that 23 alien youngsters are her responsibility. Based on observable evidence, this decision has activated behavioral patterns that treat any threat to these cubs as a direct challenge to her authority over her designated territory. He paused, watching Valerie Knox demonstrate proper arrow-fletching techniques using materials scavenged from the Grimlock Beast's natural armor plating. In essence, she has declared war on anything stupid enough to threaten her adopted children, and according to her research database, she's been preparing for this war since the day she arrived. The emergency alert that interrupted Yexketh's transmission made his entire observation pod shudder with quantum resonance. Priority alpha signals weren't used unless entire star systems were at risk. His communication array crackled with overlapping voices from 17 different command stations, all transmitting simultaneously in the kind of controlled panic that indicated very bad things happening, very quickly. All stations, this is Fleet Admiral Hex Toran. We have multiple breach signatures across the outer defense perimeter. Estimated count, 47 Shadowmaw Hunters moving in coordinated pack formation towards civilian sector 779. Yexketh's neural processors nearly seized trying to parse that information. Shadowmaw Hunters were extinct. Had been extinct for over 3 centuries. Wiped out by concentrated military action that had cost the Galactic Alliance 6 entire battle fleets. A single mature Shadowmaw could devastate planetary surfaces. 47 of them represented an extinction-level event. Fleet Admiral, this is Observer Yexketh. I'm currently monitoring the human civilian and cubs in Sector 779. Should I initiate immediate evacuation protocols? Negative, Observer. Evacuation is impossible. The Shadowmaws are moving too fast, and our nearest response teams are 90 minutes out. Consider your position compromised and prepare for final documentation. Below in the clearing, Valerie Knox had stopped her impromptu anatomy lesson. Her head tilted slightly like someone listening to distant music. Around her, 23 alien cubs began displaying the behavioral patterns their species associated with. Approaching predators. Scales dimmed, tentacles retracted, wings folded tight against bodies. Kids, Valerie said in the same calm voice she used for announcing snack time, we're going to play a new game. It's called Advanced Hide and Seek. She stood with fluid grace, her movements somehow conveying both urgency and complete confidence. Remember the positions we practiced yesterday during emergency drill number 7? 23 youngsters scattered with precision that would have made Special Forces operators weep with envy. Each cub moved to predetermined locations that maximized natural cover, while maintaining sightlines to their human protector. They had been training for this moment without even realizing it. Fleet Admiral, Yexketh transmitted, his voice carrying harmonics of disbelief. The human appears to have anticipated this scenario. Impossible. Our intelligence networks had no advance warning of Shadowmaw resurgence. The human's intelligence network appears to be more comprehensive than ours. Valerie Knox walked to what appeared to be a random pile of fallen logs at the clearing's edge. With movements that suggested intimate familiarity, she began extracting items that definitely hadn't been there during Yexketh's earlier observations. A composite bow that looked nothing like the primitive weapon she had used on the Grimlock Beast. Arrows with tips that gleamed with metallic alloys that shouldn't exist outside military laboratories. Body armor crafted from materials that his sensors couldn't identify. How long has that equipment been cached there? Fleet Admiral Hex Turan's voice carried the strained quality of someone watching carefully, laid plans disintegrate in real time. Unknown Fleet Admiral. The human has apparently been establishing supply depots throughout her operational area. Yexketh's optical sensors tracked Valerie Knox's methodical preparations. Current count suggests at least 12 hidden weapons caches within a 2-kilometer radius. The first Shadowmaw emerged from the forest line like liquid nightmare given physical form. 3 meters tall at the shoulder, covered in adaptive camouflage that shifted to match surrounding terrain, equipped with sensory organs that could track prey across dimensional barriers. Its multiple rows of teeth were designed to consume energy as well as matter, making it capable of literally eating starship hulls. Valerie Knox glanced up from stringing her composite bow. "Well, hello there. You're early. I expected another 20 minutes before your pack reached optimal formation." The Shadowmaw's response was a harmonic shriek that should have liquefied organic neural tissue at this range. Instead, Valerie Knox continued her equipment check with the detached professionalism of someone conducting routine maintenance. 46 more friends coming, aren't there? She tested her bowstring tension with obvious satisfaction. That's fine. I prepared for 50, just in case my calculations were conservative. Fleet Admiral, she knew. Somehow the human knew they were coming. Yexketh's transmission carried the weight of someone reporting phenomena that challenged basic understanding of causality. Her preparations are specifically tailored for Shadowmaw pack hunting behaviors. The second and third Shadowmaws materialized from directions that should have been impossible to predict. Their approach vectors utilized quantum displacement techniques that military strategists spent decades studying. Valerie Knox had apparently anticipated their positioning with casual accuracy. "Kids, remember what we learned about sound dampening?" Her voice somehow carried to every hidden cub without alerting the approaching predators. "Keep your breathing steady, and trust that Mama has everything handled." She drew her first arrow with movements so smooth they seemed choreographed. The projectile looked nothing like the primitive hunting shaft she had used earlier. This was military-grade ordnance disguised as sporting equipment, complete with guidance systems and explosive tips that would make weapons manufacturers question their security protocols. "Miss Valerie," whispered Tiny Whirlpool from her concealed position, "there are so many of them." "I know, sweetheart. But remember what we learned about numbers versus preparation?" Valerie Knox's voice carried reassurance that somehow made the impossible seem routine. Sometimes 47 problems can be solved more efficiently than just one. The lead Shadowmaw completed its threat assessment and attacked with the kind of coordinated precision that had made its species the apex predators of 3 galactic sectors. It moved in a blur of adaptive camouflage and dimensional displacement, closing the distance in microseconds while its packmates flanked from impossible angles. Valerie Knox's first arrow struck before the creature had traveled 2 meters. The projectile somehow tracked the Shadowmaw's dimensional shifts, adjusting trajectory through space-time distortions that shouldn't have been navigable by primitive guidance systems. The impact was comprehensive. "Direct hit, complete neural disruption," Yexketh reported in the flat tones of someone whose worldview was undergoing systematic destruction. "Target eliminated with extreme prejudice." The second and third Shadowmaws learned nothing from their packmates' fate. They pressed their attack with the kind of mindless aggression that had served their species well for millions of years. Valerie Knox eliminated them with arrows that seemed to bend physics around their own impossibility. "Fleet Admiral, I'm reading 44 more Shadowmaws approaching through the forest. The human is singing." Indeed, Valerie Knox had begun what appeared to be a lullaby while methodically eliminating apex predators with arrows that violated several fundamental laws of ballistics. Her voice carried across the clearing with the kind of maternal warmth that made hardened military observers feel nostalgic for childhood bedtimes. "Hush now, my darlings. Don't fear the night. Mama's here watching. Everything's right. Sleep safe and sound while I clear the way. Tomorrow brings sunshine and safer play." Each verse corresponded with another Shadowmaw, learning that threatening human-protected children represented catastrophically poor judgment. Valerie Knox's shooting rate had increased to approximately 1 target every 3.2 seconds, with accuracy that suggested she was somehow predicting dimensional displacement patterns before they occurred. How is she tracking them through quantum camouflage? Fleet Admiral Hextorn's voice carried the desperation of someone watching tactical doctrines crumble in real time. Unknown Fleet Admiral. Analysis suggests she's not tracking them at all. She appears to be shooting at positions where they're going to be, rather than where they currently are. The battle, if it could be called that, continued for 17 more minutes. Valerie Knox eliminated 47 Shadowmaw Hunters, while simultaneously maintaining a running commentary on proper arrow-knocking techniques for the educational benefit of her hidden cubs. Her supply of impossible ammunition seemed inexhaustible, drawn from caches that appeared whenever needed. "Last one," she announced cheerfully, releasing an arrow that curved around 3 trees and struck a Shadowmaw that had been attempting to flank from a position that shouldn't have been visible from her location. Well, that was invigorating. Who's ready for afternoon story time? 23 alien youngsters emerged from concealment with expressions of awe that transcended species barriers. They had just witnessed their human caretaker single-handedly eliminate a threat that had required the combined military might of 6 battle fleets to defeat centuries earlier. "Miss Valerie," asked Glowbug, his bioluminescent patches flickering with excitement, "how did you know they were coming?" Valerie Knox smiled while collecting her arrows from 47 corpses that were already beginning to dissolve according to Shadowmaw biology. "Well, honey, when you love someone enough to keep them safe, you pay attention to patterns. And I noticed that every 3rd Tuesday, something particularly unpleasant tries to visit our neighborhood." She ruffled the little Andraxian's sensory appendages with obvious affection. "So, I make sure to be ready for whatever shows up. It's all about preparation and follow-through." "Fleet Admiral," Yexketh transmitted in the hollow tones of someone whose understanding of reality had been permanently altered. "The human has apparently been tracking cyclical predator emergence patterns and preparing countermeasures based on predictive modeling that our xenobiology departments never developed. Observer, we need that human in our strategic planning division immediately. Fleet Admiral, I don't think you understand. She's not interested in joining our military. She's interested in keeping 23 children safe from anything stupid enough to threaten them." Below in the clearing, Valerie Knox had arranged her cubs in their usual story circle. Her voice carried the same gentle warmth she had used during combat, as if eliminating extinction-level threats was simply another aspect of proper childcare. "Now then," she said, opening a well-worn book of Earth fairy tales, "who wants to hear about the 3 little pigs? It's a lovely story about home security and the importance of proper preparation." 23 alien youngsters settled in for story time, completely confident that their human mama could handle anything the universe might throw at them. They were, as it turned out, absolutely correct. Yexketh transmitted his final report of the day with hands that no longer trembled from stress, but from something approaching religious awe. "High Command, I recommend we classify human females with childcare responsibilities as strategic assets of the highest priority. And I suggest we very politely ask what other surprises the universe might be planning for next Tuesday." The universe, apparently, was still learning what happened when you threatened a human mother's children. It was proving to be an expensive education for everyone, except the children themselves, who were perfectly safe and entirely unaware that their bedtime stories were being delivered by the most dangerous caregiver in galactic history. But Tuesday, as it turned out, had more surprises in store. The quantum disruption that rippled through Yexketh's sensors 3 hours later registered as something that shouldn't exist in standard physics. Space itself seemed to hiccup, reality developing stress fractures around a phenomenon that his equipment categorized as dimensional breach, classification unknown, recommend immediate evacuation of all personnel within 50 light-year radius. Observer Yexketh, this is emergency command override. We're detecting temporal anomalies in your sector. Please confirm your status immediately. Yexketh's optical organs focused on the clearing below, where Valerie Knox had paused mid-sentence during her recitation of Goldilocks and the 3 Bears. Her head tilted in that characteristic listening posture, but this time her expression carried something that made veteran observers check their escape pod functionality. "Emergency command. I'm observing the human female. She appears to be concerned." For the first time since his assignment began, Valerie Knox looked genuinely troubled. Not frightened. Yexketh was beginning to suspect she was incapable of fear in any meaningful sense. but troubled in the way that suggested someone had just made a very serious mistake. "Kids," she said quietly, "I need everyone to move to the deep safety positions we practiced last week. Not the regular hiding spots. The special ones." 23 alien cubs responded with movements that suggested this drill involved preparations for threats that transcended normal predator encounters. They disappeared into the landscape with efficiency that made military infiltration specialists seem clumsy by comparison. These weren't just hiding spots. They were fortified positions with escape routes, emergency supplies, and communication equipment. Emergency command. The human is implementing protocols that suggest she's prepared for temporal incursions. Temporal incursions are theoretical, observer. They don't actually happen. The dimensional readings suggest otherwise, sir. What emerged from the reality breach looked like someone had taken the concept of nightmares and given it both substance and malevolent intelligence. The void crawler stood nearly 5 meters tall, its form composed of living darkness that seemed to absorb not just light, but hope itself. These creatures existed outside normal space-time, feeding on temporal energy and leaving areas of causality collapse in their wake. They were also, according to every scientific study ever conducted, completely impossible to kill with conventional weapons. Valerie Knox stood up, brushing imaginary dust from her jumpsuit, and walked toward what appeared to be an entirely different equipment cache hidden beneath a camouflaged tarp. The weapons she extracted this time looked like they belonged in science fiction, rather than primitive Earth-hunting traditions. "Emergency command," Yexketh transmitted with the careful precision of someone reporting phenomena that might result in his own psychological evaluation. "The human has apparently been preparing for extraterrestrial threats." The bow she assembled was constructed from materials that his sensors couldn't identify, incorporating energy matrices that suggested technology beyond current galactic civilization levels. The arrows she selected seemed to shimmer with their own internal light sources, as if they contained miniaturized stars. "Excuse me," Valerie Knox called out to the void crawler in the same polite tone she used when addressing delivery personnel. "But you're not supposed to be here. This is a protected area, and I'm going to have to ask you to return to whatever dimension you crawled out of." The void crawler's response was a sound that existed outside audible frequencies, directly attacking neural tissue through quantum resonance. Most organic beings exposed to void crawler communication experienced immediate psychological breakdown, followed by existential dissolution. Valerie Knox listened to the entire threat display with obvious patience, then sighed with what sounded remarkably like maternal exasperation. "Well, I tried being reasonable. Kids, remember to keep your eyes closed and count to 50. This might get a little flashy." The arrow she released didn't travel through normal space. It somehow punched through dimensional barriers, tracking the void crawler through whatever. Twisted physics allowed it to exist partially outside reality. The impact created a burst of light that registered across 17 different energy spectrums simultaneously. The void crawler simply stopped existing. "Emergency command. The human has eliminated a Class Omega temporal entity using what appears to be improvised interdimensional ammunition." Yexketh's voice carried the flat quality of someone whose understanding of possibility had been permanently recalibrated. "The target has been completely removed from local spacetime. That's impossible. I'm beginning to think that word doesn't apply to human females with childcare responsibilities." But the day's revelations weren't finished. As Valerie Knox collected her dimensional disruption arrows, 23 alien cubs emerged from positions that revealed the true scope of her preparations. Each hiding spot had been equipped with technology that shouldn't exist outside theoretical physics laboratories. Temporal stabilizers, quantum communicators, emergency life support systems that could maintain habitable environments during reality collapse events. "Miss Valerie?" asked Tiny Resonance, his harmonic voice carrying notes of absolute trust. "Was that one of the really bad things from your special list?" "Yes, sweetheart. That was definitely on the really bad list." She knelt down to check his quantum stabilization harness with movements that suggested intimate familiarity with technology that most scientists considered purely hypothetical. "But remember what we learned about preparation and follow-through?" You always have a plan for everything. That's right. And you know why? Her smile contained enough warmth to power small suns. Because keeping you safe is the most important job in any universe. So I make sure to be ready for visitors from all of them. Observer. Emergency command transmitted with voices that suggested very important people were having very quiet conversations. We need detailed reports on every aspect of the human's capabilities. This information is being classified at levels that don't officially exist. Understood, emergency command. Though I should mention there's something else. What? Yexketh consulted his chronometer with optical organs that had seen too much impossibility for one standard day cycle. According to my calculations, we've still got 4 hours left in Tuesday. And based on observed patterns, the human appears to be expecting additional visitors. Below in the clearing, Valerie Knox was conducting equipment maintenance on weapons designed to function across multiple dimensions, while simultaneously helping cubs with their afternoon nutrition requirements. Her movements suggested someone preparing for threats that existed beyond current galactic understanding. Emergency command. I recommend we monitor this situation from maximum safe distance. The human's Tuesday schedule appears to include phenomena that our threat assessment protocols never anticipated. The communication channel filled with the kind of silence that accompanied decisions that would reshape military doctrine across 17 star systems.